Hello everyone, Ken here. Welcome to my 2015 Game of the Year Awards. I've put together a collection of award categories ranging from the standard to the silly, and I'm going to make a completely unnecessary attempt to rank all my favourites in each from the past 12 months. Now it was tough going, but I've cut every category down to 4 nominees and a winner. As always, bear in mind that these are all my own personal opinions, so if you've got something you'd like to talk about, then feel free to do so in the comments below. So, without further ado, let's get started. Best looking game. Batman Arkham Knight. For all of its issues on PC, when Batman is running right, it's easily one of the most graphically spectacular games around. It can be an easy one to write off because we've already been through 3 other similarly looking games in the series, yet Arkham Knight is absolutely a worthy contender here. It's arguably even harder to pull off convincing visuals with an established licensed property, but Rocksteady have created a world that not only looks perfect, but also moves just the way you want it to. Grow Home. Everything about the way Grow Home looks, from its chunky, bright pastel landscapes to the bumbling, edge-of-control movement of protagonist Bud, instantly sparks off every joy and pleasure sensor in my brain. It's a perfect example of the notion that you don't have to be complicated to be striking. Scrambling over the gorgeous landscape or soaring through the clear skies is such a pleasant experience that I could happily have kept bounding about in Grow Home's world a long time after I'd completed every objective. Splatoon. Nintendo is no stranger to gorgeous visuals, but the real beauty of Splatoon is that they're woven into the core of the gameplay. Splattering the world in neon ink is not just incredibly satisfying, it also happens to be the core objective. The design of the Inklings is also phenomenal, and it's a testament to that design how big of a following has sprung up around Splatoon's fashion sense. You can be sure that I spent as much time considering the look of my Inklings gear as I did the specific stats which each piece imparted. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. One of the biggest achievements of The Witcher 3 is that it's incredibly easy to get caught up in the fantasy and almost forget that the majority of the creatures you encounter aren't actually of our world. There are certainly a fair share of the more outlandish beasties, yet the designs are often so good that the game feels more like a tale from a different time than one from a different place. It certainly doesn't hurt that the environments look so spectacular, from the broadest vista to the dankest, darkest cave network. While many games fall more into either graphics technical or graphics artistic categories, The Witcher 3 stands out comfortably across both. Across the board, everything about the way it looks helps to sell this living, breathing world as a real thing. Towns and villages seem long-standing and lived in, not simply set props, while the variety of gorgeous environments you traverse is staggering. The design of their monsters ranges from the subtle to the sublimely unsubtle, yet everyone has a believable construction to it. Some of the more memorable characters are often incredibly unsettling to look at. I'll not forget the crones of Crookback Bog anytime soon. The animations are spot on too. Characters emote and converse in ways which perfectly convey their feelings, while combat is a graceful dance of whirling blades, vibrant signs and clashing steel. And those glorious monsters I talked about, oh boy do they cut apart real nicely. The deaths are often spectacularly graphic, yet it never feels overly gory or edgy, simply another piece in the puzzle that makes The Witcher 3's world so believable. Best add-on content. The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth. I spoke in Day 1's awards to just how much time I spent with The Binding of Isaac Rebirth this year, so it should come as no surprise that its expansion, the delightfully monikered Afterbirth, was going to be right up my alley. What was a surprise was just how substantial the content upgrade ended up being. Afterbirth does even more to improve on the core game than Wrath of the Lamb did for the original Isaac. New modes, characters, items, synergies, you name it. It's an astonishingly polished overhaul. Destiny, the Taken King. It takes about 2 minutes for the Taken King to establish its core characters in a more interesting fashion than an entire year of the original game had managed. Not content to stop there, Bungie finally managed to rectify many of Destiny's long-standing issues, adding tight, interesting quest lines, a proper log for them, and a selection of different endgame leveling options. The Taken King does a fantastic job of making the experience around Destiny's core gameplay what it always needed to be. Hearthstone, Blackrock Mountain. I'm still very much in love with multiplayer Hearthstone. It's a bread and butter staple of my gaming diet, and yet one of my favourite times of the Blizzard calendar has become their solo adventures. I enjoyed Naxxramas a lot, so I was eager to see what Blackrock Mountain would bring, and it certainly didn't disappoint. Not only did they find some fascinating ways to convert original battle mechanics into Hearthstone, but it also brought quite a few meta-defining new cards to the table. Hearthstone, the League of Explorers. So much fun that I had to squeeze them both in here. Rather than simply transforming another set of World of Warcraft dungeons and raids into their third adventure, however, Blizzard decided to mix things up for the League of Explorers and create an entirely new story. They also found some fascinating ways to change up the gameplay, so much so that at times it felt as though you were playing an almost entirely different game. The League of Explorers, like Blackrock before it, also introduced a handful of incredibly potent and fun new cards. All of these expansions are well worthwhile, but I'm still completely overwhelmed with just how much the Binding of Isaac Afterbirth brought to the table. A completely new game type in the form of Greed Mode, offering a fresh new way to approach the game. A new secret area with one of the most challenging bosses in the game to date. Daily runs, allowing players to compete for high scores on the same seed. A wealth of new room types and layouts. A new character, two in fact after a fascinating community ARG was completed. Item synergies were also given a fairly substantial tweaking, ensuring even more ridiculous item combinations than were possible in Rebirth. In conjunction with that came 9 new transformations, which trigger when very specific combinations are collected for an even more special bonus. When Rebirth launched, I wasn't entirely sure what else they could add, other than perhaps a new character or a few new enemies and bosses, yet Afterbirth proves that the minds behind the Binding of Isaac are some of the most imaginative in the business, and helps to ensure that I'll still be sobbing my way through dark, monster-infested basements for many more years to come. Best game-related series or show? Bloodborne with ENB. Like any From Software RPG, going into Bloodborne for the first time can be a scary prospect. There's deadly foes awaiting around every corner, mastering boss strategies can be daunting, and trying to puzzle your way through the deeply woven lore can be as tough as the actual combat at times. Thankfully, I can't think of a better guide to have by your side than EpicNameBro. Marcus doesn't miss a thing. Every inch of Yharnam is scoured for loot and lore, and the whole thing is done with an unmistakable passion for the subject matter. Metal Gear Scanlon. Like many people, I've been deeply invested in the Metal Gear Solid series since the first game arrived on PlayStation back in '98, so the idea of watching another long-term superfan of Kojima's epic franchise, in the form of Giant Bomb's Dan Reichert, guide his co-worker and complete series newcomer Drew Scanlon through the entire series was incredibly fascinating to me. Watching Drew struggle to comprehend both the controls and the outrageous narrative twists and turns made for compelling viewing all year long. Mario Maker Mornings. Have you ever wanted to watch a man lose his mind? If so, former Giant Bomb and now Kotaku writer Patrick Klepek's Mario Maker Mornings series might be precisely what you're looking for. In addition to scouring the Marioverse for the finest and most delightful creations, Patrick has also devoted hours to puzzling out some of the most devious Mario levels around, many coming from his former Giant Bomb co-workers. Few people would have the resolve to stick those nightmares out, but Patrick does. Esports! The Miller Report. 2015 was an incredible year, but amongst it all, one man stood out. A powerful man with powerful lats. A man unafraid to bring you the score and the truth. That man was Miller. I'm not sure whether the Miller Report can even be classified as game-related anymore, but it has to be on this list. Hard-hitting journalism, drama, groin-pounding action, betrayal, hurricane runners off the top rope. You owe it to yourself to watch the Miller Report, because if you don't know the score, then you don't know the truth. This is a tough one. I'd absolutely recommend you check out all of these shows, yet for me personally, nothing quite topped the sheer excitement and joy I got from Metal Gear Scanlon. I was on the edge of my seat when new episodes arrived, knowing exactly what was coming up and just trying to imagine how Drew would react to it. Dan provided a perfect foil as a man perhaps even more head over heels in love with every stupid part of Metal Gear than myself. Rounding out the roster, video man Jason A. Striker fast became an essential part of the series, as Dan, despite his intense love for the games, didn't always have the clearest memory of certain parts or pieces of information. The three of them together formed an unmissable dynamic. Seeing someone with completely fresh eyes react to scenes like the Fish and Mailed sequence from Sons of Liberty or the post-credit sequence at the end of Guns of the Patriots was truly magical. While Drew's playstyle didn't always yield optimal results, they certainly produced some hilarious ones. Along with being my favourite Metal Gear game, Snake Eater may have been my personal favourite of their series, for all the wonderful nonsense that Drew got up to. You don't earn the nickname Murder Grenade Scanlon for nothing, after all. Best Story. The Beginner's Guide. The story that The Beginner's Guide tells is so compelling that it left many people wondering whether the game itself should even have been made. Davey Reedon intentionally blurs the lines between reality and fiction, even going so far as to use his own name in the narrator role, leaving the player yearning to know just what the story behind its creation was. Is it entirely a work of fiction, or does it have at least some basis in real events? The performance isn't always perfect, but The Beginner's Guide left me with a ton to contemplate once I was finished. Bloodborne. It shouldn't be a huge surprise that there's more to the underlying lore of a FromSoft RPG than initially meets the eye, yet Bloodborne's core thematic twist still caught just about everyone off guard. Even putting aside the revelatory moment that this is more than a simple werewolf yarn, the construction of the world state and the questions it poses still have me mulling over every possibility in my head to this day. Miyazaki's team are certainly masters of intrigue, giving you just enough to send your mind spinning but never so much as to provide absolute clarity. Undertale. It starts slowly, but once Undertale's story is rolling, it picks up speed all the way to the end and beyond. The overarching narrative between the humans and monsters is the central focus, but Undertale is also packed with a ton of shorter character arcs that each manage to convey a lot in a short space of time. The way it subtly plays with the nature of the player existing outside of the game boggles the mind at times, and exploring the various ways to play through it rewards you with genuinely compelling alternative results. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Much like every aspect of the game, The Witcher 3 story content is expansive. Along with the central plotline, everything from the more lengthy narrative chains you encounter to the one-off quests that last 5 or 10 minutes always left me feeling satisfied. You can really sense the care and attention that CD Projekt Red poured into every tale and contract they created, and dealing with the world's inhabitants and their many troubles never feels like busywork, no matter how insignificant any one may be, because the writing is so strong across the board. All of these titles have stories which captivated me in the moment and left me thinking about them once they were over, yet Bloodborne worked its way into my brain more profoundly than anything else this year. It seems strange to award Best Story to a game so intent on holding information back, but for me, From Software managed to once again prove that sometimes less really can be more. Bloodborne is perhaps a touch more explicit in its storytelling than From's previous RPGs, yet they still hold firmly onto that intentional restraint. Miyazaki has spoken on many occasions to his love of speculation and ambiguity, saying that he wouldn't necessarily want a definitive closed-book account of exactly what happened. Piecing together each nugget of information to try and comprehend each faction's role in the world or what the true nature of insight might be is incredibly satisfying, especially so once all the pieces finally start to slot into place. There's little better than those moments when you discover a hidden area which raises 100 new questions, or find a one-line note which suddenly shifts the meaning of a sentiment you'd been following since the start of the game. The NPC questlines felt a tad short and unfulfilling at times, but the core story of the world and your role in it is so profoundly intriguing to me that I still think about it almost every day. And that's all the awards for today. Thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to bop that like button and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more from me. I've been Ken, thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!